Hello, everyone, and welcome to Speaking of Supply Chain, where we explore trends, current events, and innovations impacting the logistics and supply chain industries. I'm Ellen Wood, and welcome. Today, we're going to be talking with Isabel Morales again and Andrew McCarley from Coupa, and we're going to be talking a little bit about supply chain technology maturity and the people and talent aspects specifically. So let's get started. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is obviously supply chain, but we're going to really focus on the talent retention and the labor market's really hard right now. So what's going on out there that's making it so hard to keep people?
Yeah. So I think that there's been a significant investment in the recognition that in the industry of digitizing your supply chain. So the demand in general has increased significantly over the years, especially since COVID happened and a lot of the disruption. So I think that plays a big aspect in it. And then you look at just the ability of organizations to have people working at home and other things. And so you see that certain individuals tend to want to go towards organizations that are more aligned with their values or where you can work from home. And then you compound that with the high demand in supply chain and specifically in technology. And I think when you take all those things together, it creates I would say the market, what is generally being paid for some of this talent is higher. And so you're seeing just a lot of people moving from company to company right now, and the demand is high. So that's what we tend to notice right now.
I fully agree, Andrew. I think since COVID hit and then supply chain went to the top of organizations' agendas, then all of the sudden the money for investment became available. And with that, the demand for experienced people in supply chain, it also raised. And then, of course, when we look at people with experience, say with 8 years of experience, 9, 10 plus, that it's a very limited group of individuals. So then people have plenty of more options where to go these days.
Yeah, the only thing that's going to change that is more time.
Indeed.
But in the meantime, they're fighting over these limited labor resources.
Yeah, they are. And it can be very disruptive, especially if, a lot of this town is working on very, critical initiatives, that have high impact in terms of the organization. So when an individual leaves, it can be very disruptive. I mean, I think what we're trying to do is talk to a lot of our customers. And if they have, one or two individuals only working on these types of initiatives, to augment them with a managed service provider or other things so that they can have some continuity throughout. If somebody does leave, it's also good capability building for the organization as well. Organizations that have one or two modelers or, I feel like they're at risk just because of the dynamics of that and the importance of the work that they're doing in an organization.
Well, and especially since, as you had mentioned, there are companies fighting for people, and people are trying to find the organizations that align with their values. So the work from home is obviously something that's important to many people, and it's not always conducive with being able to get the work done as effectively as it needs to be. So are we seeing a lot of poaching when it comes to this talent? Are people jumping because other companies are offering something different or something better? What's that risk look like for organizations?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of poaching from other companies for sure. And so I think that's one element of it. The other is that, when there's high demand, people can be more selective, and they're going to be more selective. And a lot of times it's going to be based on going to organizations that are really investing in digitizing their supply chain, that are doing something exciting, that are going to be having career paths for these individuals. Mm-hmm. And they want to be working on digital twins. They want to be working on, more cutting edge things, not doing design the way they did 10 years ago, but looking at more continuous design and other things. And so that's some of the elements I've seen. And I'm sure Isa has a really good perspective because of the talent that they have there as well.
Yeah, so we do see how that has impacted our services directly. So we have a really high demand right now for staff augmentation. And I think one of the reasons for that is because since people are moving so quickly so often, organizations are not prepared to ramp up and train resources as quickly as the consulting industry. So in the consulting industry, we are more used to turnover because it's higher. Although Miebach, it has one of the lowest in the industry, I have to say. But we are used to this ramp up quickly of resources. We have the structure, the training in place, like the Center of Excellence that I lead. And basically, we are set up for such situations, but big corporations, organizations in general, are not prepared for this. So, and I think the other challenge when it comes to digitizing the supply chain is the profile of people or talent that is required for this, because you need almost like a unicorn. You need somebody who understands supply chain, you need somebody who understands data, you need somebody who understands systems, and that somehow can bridge all these different components together. And sometimes to find all of these expertise in one single individual, it is quite difficult. So oftentimes what organizations need to do, or at least that's the way I see it, is to complement different individuals to have a more complete team that have the whole set of talents. So either you do that with a team, or you do it with externals, with a consulting partner that helps you in a specific pillar of the ones I'm mentioning. So I think also those two things that I would say lack of experience or structure to ramp up new people quickly, and then the difficulties in finding these very unique profiles that supply chain digitalization requires.
Yeah. One of the other benefits of a consulting partner like Miebach is that they've probably seen a lot of these similar problems or challenges or use cases at other companies as well, in other industries or in the same industry, so that they're able to leverage some of their knowledge and help really, I think, ramp up a lot quicker in general.
So I can only imagine that there's a limited number of those unicorns out there in the industry, ready and looking for a job right now, because I'm sure a lot of them have found that place where they want to be. Being a unicorn, you have that ability to say yes to the things you want and no to the things you don't want. But then when it comes to either for a company to either, have to find and recruit and, onboard that unicorn, or replace them with, Isa, as you were saying, like 2 or 3 people that are knowledgeable and capable in multiple different areas so that you can build a COE. What else is there that companies can do to kind of mitigate that? Because that's a long process for either one person that's a unicorn or 3 people that are just great.
Okay, so we do see a high demand right now in our services that reflect that issue. And what we see in big companies that have trouble retaining modelers, which is probably the most specific and highly demanded profile, is that companies are turning to managed services for the modeling role. So we have set up with clients where they outsource the modeling, so the technical part, the data ingestion, the conversion of the data to the model, but then the COE, on the customer end, they have project leads that are experts in the business, experts in talking to the people that have the information, and basically they are that single point of contact to our modelers and to drive those projects in the organization. So I think that this setup of managed services for modeling specifically, it's really on the rise.
Yeah. I think that in addition to that, I think a lot of it depends on where you are from a COE maturity standpoint. So companies that are really starting to go on that journey, invest in COEs, oftentimes you're going to have a smaller number of resources. At that time, it's important to really either, I think that it's important to start off with a consulting partner that can help really accelerate that path, and then hiring in somebody experienced that has that supply chain knowledge and that technical capability and the modeling capability. Because, as Isa said, it's like a unicorn. As you continue to mature as a COE organization, it's important to start to build a plan to, progression planning and a career path for individuals. And that's when you start to see companies start to go and say, I want us to start recruiting from more universities, right, in different programs. And, you'll start to see that there's a lot of for example, a lot of universities that use our software in their program, right? So they're coming out of school with experience in our software and they're able to kind of hit the ground running. So you start to see as organizations mature that they're starting to have some experienced individuals and investing in some of that talent. So I think that it depends really where you are on the maturity standpoint. I do think no matter where you are in the maturity standpoint, it's important to work with a consulting partner early in your journey. A lot of it from a continuity standpoint, from accelerating value, so that you can build traction in your organization and get really get the traction behind building out that COE and maturity and getting the investment in that. I think it's important. As you continue to progress, I think it's important to bring that in, because you can almost think of them as an innovation arm at some time. They're seeing challenges in other industries, and they can come in and say, have you thought about this? Or we see this opportunity. And also it's a great way to upskill the talent on your individual team, because generally they're going to have a lot of experience and a lot of talent, and they can really help elevate that team.
Indeed, I think that the talent portion of a team, and we also advise our customers when they are setting up that organization or that structure of their center of excellence. I think it's really important, and we see this pitfall, I would call it, quite frequently, and is to set up a COE as if it were an analytics team, a supply chain analytics team. And the supply chain design COE goes way beyond being a supply chain analytics team. These are teams that are making huge transformational decisions, that are suggesting where the company should go next, where they should invest. So this team, it shouldn't be set up exclusively as a group of analysts. And then that team should be also enabled to growth within the team, similar as in a consulting setup, where you start maybe as an analyst, consultant, and then as you gain more experience, then you have more responsibility in leading this type of engagements. So I do see clients that maybe start on their own, that start setting up their COEs as an analytics team. And then after a couple of years, the people who are on the team, they want to move on to a different role because they want a promotion, and they can only access that promotion outside of the COE. So I think that's also critical to include when you are designing your supply chain design center of excellence.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's two other things on that. So one, the career path and being able to grow is important and develop. So if an organization is not investing in that career path and the development, then they're going to go external to get that. So I think that's a one key aspect of what you were just talking about. The other one goes to they want to be able to go to an organization where they can make an impact. Sometimes COEs can be almost standalone and isolated from the business. And what you see in more mature COEs, the COEs that are able to retain talent, the ones that have been able to be more mature in this area, they have a governance kind of model where the business and the COE are very integrated. And in that, there's partnership with the business in terms of how can the modeling team help answer questions for the business. As the business has other questions, how is it kind of a closed loop process that's coming back? How can the modeling teams building the infrastructure, the modeling, doing the modeling to answer their questions, in the output that they can receive and actually action within their day-to-day processes. And then it's a feedback loop. And that's what you see in the more mature companies. When you don't have that governance process, you start to see that they're isolated, they're making decisions, they're not being actioned. You start to feel disempowered, not very excited, and then you end up leaving. That's what we see a lot.
Indeed. And that's why I think to your point earlier, Andrew, that it is advisable to work with a consulting partner that has seen organizations, what has worked, what has not worked. And when we set up new COEs for clients, we take care of two things. So we understand that a newly created COE needs to bring value quickly. because they need to prove why this team is important for the organization to back up the investment and so on. But at the same time, you need to set up all the processes, all the governance, races, etc., etc., that supports the team in the long term, so that it is successful in the long term. So when you're launching this initiative, I think some certain support is required so you can tackle both things at the same time. Bring your value while building a solid foundation.
Yeah, I agree. It's a journey too, right? So sometimes it seems overwhelming when we just talk about some of the things that make it successful in the long term. But it's a journey, and then I think that the consulting partner is the one who can help you with those journeys, the pitfalls, and how to make that successful. So that's one key thing, is that the organizations that have been successful in this, it's not been something that you just snap your fingers and overnight you've got a robust, mature COE, right? It's been something that they've built out, and most of them that we've seen have worked with consulting partners that have gotten there.
So I know historically it's often been an either or, where it's either labor or technology. You're either going to hire more people to do it, or you're going to hire or buy a technology solution that's going to enable a lot more capability. How does technology fit in with building these COEs that have these elaborate career paths for people?
I think that sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go.
No, I think that it's not mutually exclusive. I just think that it brings, having those two together at the right level, it brings the maturity to a different level. So for example, at the beginning you might have, or you might spend 50% of your project in data collection, data cleansing, setting up your model, and repeating this over and over again. There is certain inefficiency. Once you bring technology in, then you reduce that portion that you spend in cleaning data and setting up the model, and then you have the people, so the individuals, spending more time in the portion that we add value the most as humans, critical thinkers, which is in defining scenarios and applying thought leadership to what the models or what the technology is bringing to the table. So I think that technology facilitates, it creates more speed, it creates more efficiency, so that the people that are on the team can spend their time in the things that add value the most, as opposed to mechanical or data cleansing type of activities.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in spaces where you have technology, and then you're not as dependent on the talent or the capability of individuals, it tends to be when you're doing something more repetitive, a task that's repetitive, that you're doing the same things over and over again. The problems in supply chain change daily, and I mean, you just look at the last couple of years how different they are, right? So when you're talking about modeling and you're trying to model different use cases, you really need to have the right talent that can take those business problems, develop a model that answers those questions, and then is working to improve that over time. And then as new problems come up, they can work and develop and attack those problems. So if you just have technology alone, maybe you can stand it up to answer a specific question and work through that. And you can have somebody from a consulting standpoint come in and say, okay, we're going to do all the data cleansing, all the stuff, and it's going to answer this one question. What happens when the something changes in that? A new constraint comes up, a new problem comes up, a port shuts down, there's a labor strike, that there's a new geopolitical risk that pops up, that now you have to look at something and analyze it different. Or what if there's new problems that come up in our priority of the organization? It's important to have that talent. Now, on the same time, if you have that talent and you don't have the right technology, then you're going to have a hard time retaining talent, because, some of these really strong, capable, individuals are not going to come to an organization to work in Excel, right? They're going to come in, they want to work in the right technology, the best products. It's good for their resume, and intellectually it's stimulating, and they're going to enjoy the work more. So I think both of them are very important together. You're not going to get the true value out of the technology without the right people in this space. And you're not going to get the right people without the right technology.
So is it a 1 + 1 = 3 when it comes to the people and the technology that that together they're going to, accelerate that result that much faster or that much better?
1 + 1 = 10, but yeah.
Wow. Okay. That who doesn't want a 10?
That's right.
No, I agree. And I also tying back to your point, Alan, that with talent retention, there's also a risk at some point, and tying it to what Andrew was saying, that it depends on the type of activity or the type of questions that we're answering. So
Mm-hmm.
while all of these strategic things and specific supply chain problems, you will always need a talented individual behind the technology, behind the machine, there are also other types of problems that are, or not necessarily problems, recurrent activities that you
Mm-hmm.
can automate and that you can standardize. So for example, doing the annual budget. Yeah, you have a model of your supply chain, and the annual budgeting process is always the same. Yeah, so in this case, bringing in technology to automate as much as possible will actually free up capacity in a talented individual that has knowledge of the whole supply chain to do another activity that brings even more value to the organization. So all these repetitive processes on the strategic or tactical planning, budgeting, I don't know, inventory deployment. So things that come in cycles and that are regular, I think there you have an opportunity to automate, make it more people independent, and then leave the people for these specific challenges and questions that Andrew mentioned earlier.
So does having that technology also eliminate some of the risk of these people leaving, or when they leave, it's not so disruptive to, to as they're building their COE and as people are, making choices about where they want to work and what they want to do? Obviously, having all of that automation in the background gives companies a little bit of a buffer, maybe?
Yeah. So I think that it does in those specific problems that you're trying to solve. I think that, the more companies have started to invest in digital twins and building out, a digital representation of their supply chain, you start to rely less on kind of the individual's knowledge, and you start to build up the right level of the right knowledge within the organization, the team, and in the technology that you can start to bring in people, and you're not so reliant on that. The other thing I think that is important is that, the thing that we see is that it comes down to, if people view design the way that they did 10 years ago, they're not going to be successful with retaining talent. They're not going to be keeping up with their competitors, and they're not going to be able to build out a successful COE. That's where it goes the problem. So design 10 years ago was, I've got a specific, I want to evaluate my network,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is something that everyone does, right? And will continue to do, and that's important. And that's what was done, and that's when a lot of modeling was done. At that point in time, you really need somebody to have knowledge of your company's supply chain specifically, or specific in that industry. You're relying specifically on individuals' expertise. As you start to mature into more continuous design, so how can we apply modeling techniques to solve, weekly operational challenges, monthly problems, et cetera, and you start to build out a robust digital twin, you start to not have to rely so much on individual subject or knowledge, and you can start to really build out a COE that's mature, and you can really start to advance and accelerate the value you're receiving.
Yeah, it's not a set it and forget it anymore. It's constantly having to reevaluate or update or understand what's changing and adapting to it.
Yeah, you're not starting from scratch each time. I think that's the thing, right? So
that's huge.
When you start from scratch, you have to know the data, all the different elements of it, all the intricacies of that company's data. You have to understand the supply chain, the business questions. You're starting from scratch every single time when you look at it the way it was done 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think,
and for some organizations still today, I have to say.
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked
Yes.
at how many organizations are still operating that way. And what would keep me up at night if I was back in industry is, what are their competitors doing? Because we have a unique, both have a unique lens here when it comes to this, because we see what different companies are doing. And, you see some companies that I think are going to really kind of leap ahead of some of their competitors just based on what they're doing and how they're viewing this versus some other companies that may have been really strong in the space or really strong but are not investing or just not even thinking about it, looking at it in a different way as they did, 10 years ago.
So aside from just benchmarking yourself against competitors, how do you measure the success of that supply chain COE? What
Isa,
metrics?
do you want to kind of jump in some of the maturity thing that you're talking about?
So I think a good measurement is the Gartner maturity. I forgot what's the name. Sorry, I need to say it again. This was 5-stage. 5-stage.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll say it again. Yes, I think a very good schema to evaluate your maturity is the 5-stage maturity from Gartner for supply chain planning teams. And within that maturity, you have 5 stages, but then the components of that maturity are 1, processes, 2, KPIs, 3, people or talent, and then the third one is technology. And then within those 5 different stages of maturity, each of those components go at a next level. So I think identifying at which stage of maturity you are in each of those 4 components and where you want to be, it should give you a roadmap on what should be your next steps to achieve that next level.
All right. Any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I appreciate the time. It was a great conversation. I think it's timely. We're seeing more and more organizations starting to kind of jump on board and looking at things in a new way, and it's an exciting time to see them go through this journey. Hopefully, we'll see more and more start to go down this path soon. So.
No, I just wanted to say that I also appreciate a lot this conversation, and hopefully people that are thinking about setting up a COE or that are part of a COE can take something from this conversation. And also, I think it's super important to highlight talent, and how critical it is in the journey of supply chain digitalization, and specifically also in supply chain design center of excellences. So thanks for this conversation.
Yes, it's been a great conversation today. Well, thank you so much to both Andrew and Isa. Isa for joining us again. Andrew for joining us for the first time. I think you guys have made some excellent points, and I hope our listeners enjoyed today's discussion. That brings us to the end of our episode. If we hope you enjoyed our conversation, please rate our podcast. That helps us to appear in other people's searches. 5 stars would be great. 4 stars is okay. 5 is better. Maybe 10. Andrew said 10. Can we do a 10 stars? 1 + 1 is 10.
Right.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Supply Chain.